All right, time to dive into property development. You ready to crack open this book, Property Development for Beginners?
Sounds good to me. This should be fun.
This one is by Steve Chandler, and we're doing this deep dive. For anyone who's ever thought about taking on a property development project, or even if you're just curious about how those buildings around us get made.
I think a lot more people are curious about that than we realize.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to uncover some really interesting insights, like how you can actually minimize risk before you even buy a property, and the critical role of something called a feasibility study. You ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah. Feasibility studies are super important. We'll definitely be talking about that.
I'm excited to get into that one. So, Skiff kicks off the book by really diving into the why behind property development. What do you think motivates people to get into this field?
Well, he's pretty upfront about it. The main driver is profit, but he's quick to point out that the successful developers aren't just chasing a quick buck. They're more strategic about balancing risk and reward.
So, it's not just about the money, it's about the thrill of the challenge, too.
Exactly. He actually compares it to extreme sports enthusiasts. The higher the risk, the greater the potential reward, and the bigger the adrenaline rush.
So, it's like they're getting a business eye.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But that's where understanding your personal why comes in. Like why you're interested in property development.
Is this something I want to do? Why would I want to do this?
Right. Is it financial freedom? Or maybe building a legacy for your family? Or even just creating something tangible that benefits your community? Having that clear vision is super important
That's so true.
because it's going to guide your decisions throughout the whole process.
Like a guiding principle.
Yeah, exactly. Like a compass to
Yeah.
keep you on track.
Mhm.
Speaking of staying on track, the book spends a lot of time talking about managing risk, which seems like a pretty crucial aspect of property development.
Yeah, for sure. Risk is a big deal in any business, but especially in property development where there's so much at stake.
Exactly.
Mm.
And Steve doesn't sugarcoat it. He dedicates a whole chapter to risk mitigation. And he even recommends seeking legal, professional, and financial advice throughout the entire journey, especially for beginners.
It makes sense to have experts in your corner when you're dealing with something this complex.
Right. And one of the tools he introduces is this concept of a risk matrix.
A risk matrix. Okay, what's that?
Well, it's basically a checklist of all the things that could potentially go wrong with your project. Like, what if this happens, or what if that happens? He even shares a story about a client who suffered a huge financial loss because they didn't properly research the market demand before starting their project. It's a cautionary tale that really highlights the importance of planning.
Okay, so we need to anticipate potential problems and try to come up with solutions before they even happen. But what kinds of risks are we talking about? Can you give me an example?
Sure, imagine you're developing like a residential building in an area that's currently zoned for high-density development. You've done all your research, secured your funding, and you're ready to break ground. But then unexpectedly, the local council decides to rezone the area for low-density development.
Oh, no.
Suddenly, your project's no longer viable because you can't build as many units as you planned.
That's a huge setback.
Yeah, it could be a major financial risk that could have been avoided with careful due diligence.
So it's about doing your homework and really understanding all the factors that could affect your project.
That's right. And it's not just about zoning changes either.
Oh.
Think about global events like the 2008 financial crisis or the recent pandemic.
Oh, yeah, those had a big impact on the property market.
Huge impact. These unforeseen circumstances can completely change the market, affecting things like demand financing, even construction costs.
It makes it seem like property development is kind of like surfing. You've got to be able to ride those waves and adjust to the changing conditions.
Exactly. And one strategy Steve highlights is the power of joint venture partners.
Okay, tell me more about that. What are joint venture partners and how do they help with risk?
Basically, it's like teaming up with someone who's already played the game and knows all the rules. Someone who can bring different assets to the table, like land expertise, capital construction experience, that kind of thing.
So it's like having a mentor or a guide through the process.
Yeah, exactly. Like finding a teammate who complements your strengths and weaknesses.
I like that analogy.
Let's say you found the perfect site, but you don't have the cash to buy it outright.
That's a common problem.
You could partner with an investor who provides the capital in exchange for a share of the profits.
Oh, that makes sense.
Or maybe you have the money, but you lack experience in construction management. You could partner with an experienced builder who oversees that part of the project.
So there are all sorts of different joint venture partners depending on what your needs are.
Exactly. And Steve really emphasizes the importance of having a clear, written agreement that outlines each partner's responsibilities, contributions, and profit sharing.
So it's like a prenup for property development.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly. It protects everyone involved and makes sure the collaboration runs smoothly.
Right. A well-structured joint venture agreement can be incredibly valuable, protecting both parties and minimizing potential conflicts down the line.
You don't want any surprises later on?
Definitely not. I actually remember Steve sharing an anecdote in the book about a joint venture partner who insisted on a monthly management fee on top of their profit share.
Oh, wow.
It really highlights the importance of clearly defining the terms up front.
Absolutely. So we've talked about motivation, risk management, finding the right partners. But how do we know if our property development idea will actually work?
That's where the feasibility study comes in.
Okay, so tell me about those. What is a feasibility study?
Think of it as your crystal ball.
Hmm.
It gives you a glimpse into the potential profitability of your project.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So Steve outlines three main types: the RLV calculator, the static feasibility study, and the cash flow analysis.
Okay, and what are the differences between those?
The RLV calculator is like a quick back-of-the-napkin calculation, just to see if your project is even worth exploring further.
Okay, so a quick and dirty estimate.
Exactly. Then there's the static feasibility study, which gives you a more detailed snapshot of your project's financials at a specific point in time.
So it's more in depth.
Right. And finally, the most comprehensive one is the cash flow analysis, which forecasts your income and expenses month by month throughout the project's entire lifespan.
So it's a long-term view of the project's financials.
Exactly. And Steve is really clear that a feasibility study is not about just making up numbers. It requires a lot of research.
So what kind of research are we talking about?
Well, for starters, you need to figure out your project's likely revenue. This means researching similar properties in the area, understanding market rents or sale prices, and factoring in things like potential vacancy rates.
Just you have to really understand the market.
Yes. Then you have to estimate your construction costs. This involves getting quotes from builders, consulting with quantity surveyors, and factoring in potential cost overruns.
It's like putting together a giant puzzle.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it's not just revenue and construction costs. You also need to think about things like professional fees for architects, engineers, lawyers, marketing and sales expenses, even holding costs like council rates and insurance while the project is underway.
So there are a lot of moving parts to consider.
There are. A thorough feasibility study takes all of these factors into account so you get a realistic picture of the project's profitability. And Steve actually provides a helpful checklist in the book, outlining all the essential items to consider.
I can see how this feasibility study is a critical step. It's like having a financial roadmap guiding you towards a successful project.
Exactly. And speaking of finding the right path, let's shift gears to site selection, which Steve famously calls location, location, location.
It's the golden rule of real estate, isn't it? But how do you actually go about finding that perfect site?
Well, Steve says we've got to think like our target market, put ourselves in their shoes.
Okay, that makes sense.
What would they be looking for? What amenities are important to them? For example, if you're developing apartments for young professionals, being close to public transport, cafes, and bars might be really important.
So it's not just about finding any piece of land. It's about finding land that aligns with your target market's needs and desires.
Precisely. And Stella recommends using a combination of online tools and good old-fashioned research to narrow down your search. There are zoning maps available online that show what kind of development is allowed in different areas. You can also use real estate portals to see what's on the market.
So technology can play a big role in site selection.
It can. But Steve also emphasizes the importance of getting out there and physically inspecting potential sites. Nothing beats seeing the property firsthand, getting a feel for the neighborhood, talking to local residents.
So it's a mix of digital and real-world research.
Exactly. And it's not just about identifying the positives. You also need to consider the negatives.
Like what?
Are there any environmental issues like soil contamination or flood risks? Is there a lot of traffic noise or industrial activity nearby?
Those factors could definitely impact a project's desirability and its profitability.
Absolutely. So it's about weighing the pros and cons and deciding if the site truly fits your vision.
It sounds like a complex process with a lot of variables to consider.
It can be. And that's why Steve has a whole chapter on due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
which is all about uncovering any hidden secrets the property might have.
Hidden secrets. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Well, imagine this. You found a site that looks perfect on paper, but then you discover that it was previously used as an industrial waste dump.
Oh, no!
Suddenly, you're facing massive remediation costs and potential legal liabilities.
That's a nightmare scenario.
It is. And Steve shares real-life stories like this in the book to emphasize how important due diligence is.
So due diligence is like getting a background check on the property before you commit.
Exactly. It's about protecting yourself from those nasty surprises that can derail your project.
What other kinds of things should we be looking for during due diligence?
Well, you want to check for things like easements, which are legal rights that give someone access to or use of your property.
So like a right of way or something.
Exactly. Imagine finding out after you've bought a site that your neighbor has an easement to drive across your land. That could really mess up your plans.
Yeah, that would be a problem. You'd have to redesign your whole project.
Exactly. You also need to check for existing tenancy agreements if you're buying a property that already has tenants.
Because those could limit what you can do with the property.
Exactly. And of course, you need to do a thorough environmental assessment to make sure there's no contamination or other issues.
So due diligence is really a multifaceted process. It involves environmental checks, legal research, and even looking at tenant situations. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion to uncover all the hidden aspects of the property.
That's a great way to put it.
Mhm.
And once you've done your due diligence and you're confident about the site, it's time to move on to acquisition, the art of the deal.
Okay, so let's say we found a property that passes all our due diligence checks. How do we actually go about buying it?
Well, there are two main approaches. You can approach the owner directly, or you can work through a real estate agent.
So it's like choosing between asking someone out on a date yourself or having a friend set you up.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. Approaching the owner directly can save you on agent fees, but it requires more legwork and negotiation skills.
You've got to be confident and comfortable with negotiating.
Right. Going through an agent can streamline the process since they often have existing relationships with owners and they can handle the negotiations for you.
So it's a trade-off between cost and convenience.
Exactly. But either way, you're entering negotiation territory, which can be a little daunting. What if the owner doesn't want to sell? Or what if they want an unreasonable price?
Those are valid concerns. How do you navigate those situations?
Steve emphasizes the importance of being prepared for anything. It's like a game of chess. You have to anticipate the other player's moves and have a counter strategy ready.
That's a great analogy.
So one option is to secure the site with a property option. This gives you the exclusive right to buy the property within a certain time frame at a predetermined price.
So it's like putting a reservation on the property, giving you time to finalize your plans and secure financing.
Exactly. And it gives you control of the site without having to commit to buying it right away.
That's smart.
Another way to gain control without buying up front is through those joint ventures we talked about earlier.
Oh, right. Like partnering with a landowner.
Exactly. They contribute the land and you bring the development expertise and capital.
So it's a win-win for both parties.
Exactly. The landowner benefits from the increased value of their land, and you get control of the site without having to buy it outright.
So it's all about finding creative solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Right. And Steve emphasizes the importance of negotiating a favorable site acquisition agreement, ideally one where you don't have to pay for the land until later in the development process.
That sounds amazing. How is that even possible?
Well, it might involve structuring a delayed payment plan with the owner, or securing funding that's contingent on pre-sales of the development, or even using a combination of joint ventures and other creative financing strategies.
So it's about thinking outside the box and finding win-win solutions.
Exactly. It's not just about signing on the dotted line. It's about carefully considering all your options, weighing the risks and rewards, and negotiating a deal that sets your project up for success.
And I imagine that's where having a good lawyer comes in handy.
Absolutely. Steve dedicates a whole chapter to the legal aspects of property development, and he stresses the importance of seeking legal advice throughout the entire process.
It's like navigating a legal jungle. You need an experienced guide to help you avoid the pitfalls.
Exactly. A good lawyer can help you understand all the ins and outs of property law and review contracts and make sure your interests are protected.
So what are some of the key legal areas that developers need to be aware of?
Well, it starts with site acquisition, which we just discussed. You need a solid agreement that outlines all the terms of the purchase, any conditions, easements, or restrictions on the property. Then there's the whole area of joint ventures if you're partnering with others. You need a comprehensive agreement that defines each partner's roles, responsibilities, and profit-sharing arrangements.
So it's all about having those clear agreements in place to prevent disputes down the line.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. You'll also need legal advice when you're dealing with the authorities getting building permits and navigating those construction contracts with your builders.
Wow. It sounds like legal advice is woven into every stage of the process.
It is. And Steve really stresses the importance of seeking legal advice early on, even before you've acquired a site. It's better to be safe than sorry.
I agree. It's like having that legal safety net in place just in case something goes wrong.
Exactly. And speaking of safety nets, Steve also talks a lot about the importance of insurance.
Ah, yes. Insurance is crucial in any business, but I imagine it's especially important in property development where there are so many potential risks.
Absolutely. He dedicates a whole chapter to risk management through insurance, highlighting it as a key tool for protecting your project from unforeseen events.
So, what types of insurance do property developers typically need?
Well, there are a few key ones. Public liability insurance, professional indemnity insurance, workers' compensation insurance, and construction risk insurance.
Okay, break that down for me. What does each one cover?
So, public liability insurance protects you if someone gets injured or their property is damaged on your construction site.
So, if someone trips over building materials or if debris from your site damages a neighboring property?
Exactly. Public liability insurance would cover those costs and any legal liabilities.
That's good to know. What about professional indemnity insurance?
That one protects you if someone suffers a financial loss because of negligent advice or services that you provided. So, for example, if your architect makes a design error that leads to costly repairs,
Hmm.
professional indemnity insurance would cover those costs.
It's like a backup plan in case your professional advice backfires.
Exactly. Then there's workers' compensation insurance, which is essential for protecting your workers if they get injured on the job. It covers their medical expenses and lost wages.
Right.
And it's usually a legal requirement.
Right, so it's about protecting your team and making sure they're taken care of if something happens.
Exactly. And finally, there's construction risk insurance, which covers damage to the building itself during the construction phase.
So, like if there's a fire, flood, or storm damage.
Exactly. Or even theft of building materials. Construction risk insurance would cover those losses.
So, it's like a comprehensive insurance package for the entire construction process.
Precisely. And Steve recommends talking to an insurance expert to determine exactly what coverage you need for your specific project and location.
That makes sense. So, insurance is another crucial part of risk management and property development.
It is. It's about transferring some of those inherent risks to a third party
Mhm.
so you can have peace of mind and financial protection if things go wrong.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about motivation risk assessment, finding the right partners, conducting a feasibility study, selecting a site, due diligence acquisition, legal considerations, and even insurance.
Phew, that's a lot.
It's clear that property development is a complex and multifaceted process.
It is, but it's also a fascinating and rewarding one. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I'm already hooked. I can't wait to see what other insights Steve has in store for us in the next part of the book.
Me too. There's a lot more to explore.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back with part 2 of our deep dive into property development for beginners after a quick break. Welcome back to our deep dive into property development for beginners. So in part 1, we really dug into those initial stages of property development, from assessing risk and finding the right partners, to securing that site and understanding those legal and financial essentials. Now we're going to shift gears a bit and delve into the exciting part, actually bringing your project to life.
That's right. It's time to start building. But before we get all hammers and nails, Steve reminds us that successful property development, it's more than just bricks and mortar. It requires a solid business mindset.
So you're saying it's not enough to just have a creative vision. You need to approach it strategically and analytically.
Exactly. He's very clear about that in the book. Property development. It's a business,
Ah,
not a hobby. It requires objectivity, a willingness to make tough decisions based on facts and figures, and the ability to detach yourself emotionally from the project when necessary.
that makes sense. So falling in love with a charming old building, that might not be the best strategy if the numbers don't add up.
Exactly. Sentimentality. It can really cloud your judgment, lead to some expensive mistakes. You need to evaluate the project based on market demand, financial projections, a realistic assessment of the potential risks.
So it's about making informed decisions, even if it means letting go of a personal attachment to a specific property.
Precisely. And Steve, he consistently emphasizes de-risking your project at every stage, which aligns with that whole business mindset thing. We talked about things like thorough due diligence, securing the site under option, partnering with experienced professionals. But it's worth repeating, minimizing risk. That's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's not a one-time thing. It's a continuous effort throughout the development journey.
Absolutely. And speaking of building a strong team, Steve reminds us that expert advice, it's crucial. We've talked about lawyers, insurance brokers, property development consultants. Are there others we should have on our property development dream team?
Fill in the gaps for us.
Well, depending on the project's scope. You might need architects to design the building engineers to make sure it doesn't fall down, quantity surveyors to accurately estimate those costs, and marketing professionals to help sell or lease the finished product.
Sounds like we're assembling a small army here. But I get it. Having those specialists on board, that can be super valuable.
Especially for someone who's new to this whole world. And Steve encourages us to really view these experts as partners, collaborators bringing their unique skills and insights.
It takes a village to build a property.
Right? Yeah. And just like on those home renovation shows, you've got the architect, the builder, the interior designer, all working together.
To create something amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And communication is key. Everyone needs to understand their roles and responsibilities. It's a team effort.
You need that synergy to make the project a success.
Right. But even with the best team in the world, not all property development projects are guaranteed to be profitable, right? Things happen.
You can't predict everything.
Unexpected challenges. Markets can shift. Unforeseen circumstances. They can all impact the project's bottom line.
So there's always an element of risk, even with all the planning and expertise.
Absolutely. Property development, it's inherently risky.
Mm.
But having a good team by your side, that helps you navigate those challenges, make informed decisions, increase your chances of success.
They're like your navigators helping you steer the ship through those stormy seas.
Exactly. And another crucial aspect Steve highlights, knowing your market inside and out.
This goes back to what we talked about earlier with site selection and due diligence.
It all ties together.
But remind me again, why is understanding your market so important?
Well, think about it. If you're developing these high-end luxury apartments, but your target market is mainly first-time homebuyers with limited budgets, your project is probably not going to succeed.
Right. You need to build what people actually want and can afford.
Exactly. And that knowledge, it informs every aspect of your project, from the location and design of the building to the pricing and marketing strategy.
It's like building a product. You need to know who your customers are before you can even start designing it.
Exactly. And Steve recommends conducting thorough market research before you invest any money into a proposed project.
So what kind of things should that research cover?
Well, things like demographic data, age,
Uh-huh.
income levels, family structures.
Yeah.
But also lifestyle preferences, buying trends, even future projections for population growth and economic development in the area.
So you're looking at both the current market and trying to anticipate future trends.
Exactly. You need to be ahead of the curve. And Skilling provides a lot of info in the book about how to do effective market research, using online resources, talking to real estate professionals, even just spending time in the target neighborhood and observing.
It's like becoming a detective for your target market.
Kind of. You want to understand their habits, their needs, their desires.
So market research, it's all about ensuring your project aligns with your target audience.
Exactly. And speaking of aligning your vision with reality, let's move on to one of the most exciting parts. Design.
Okay, so we've got the site, our team's assembled, we've done our market research. Now we can unleash our creativity and design that dream building.
Yeah, it's where things start to take shape. But Steve cautions us about getting carried away with those grand ideas without considering the practicalities in the budget.
Right. You need to balance those creative visions with financial realities.
Exactly. He emphasizes starting with a clear understanding of your budget and working closely with your architect and quantity surveyor to make sure the design is actually achievable.
So you're saying we might have to compromise on some of those fancy features if they're going to blow the budget.
It happens. And it's better to make those tough decisions early on than to face cost overruns later in the project.
Okay, so let's break down this design process. Where do we even begin?
Steve describes it as a journey. It starts with that rough sketch, then evolves through different stages, from concept design to authority approval drawings, and finally to the full construction documentation.
So it's a step-by-step process, each stage building on the previous one.
Exactly. That initial concept design phase. That's where you and your architect brainstorm ideas, explore different layouts, start shaping the building's overall form and function.
Sounds like a very creative and collaborative process.
It is. And it's important to involve your quantity surveyor at this stage, too, to get those preliminary cost estimates based on the proposed design.
So you're checking in with the budget early on, making sure your creative vision aligns with reality.
Exactly. You don't want any surprises later on. Once you've nailed down that concept design, you need to develop those more detailed drawings and specs for those authority approvals.
Ah, yes, the dreaded paperwork, building codes, fire regulations, accessibility requirements. It can feel overwhelming.
It can, but it's a crucial step. Ensuring your building is safe, meets all the legal requirements, can be legally occupied.
It's about protecting yourself and your future occupants.
Right, and once you have those approvals, you move on to the final stage, developing the full construction documentation, detailed drawings and specs for every single aspect of the building, from the foundation to the fixtures.
It's like creating a giant instruction manual for building the entire structure.
That's a great way to think about it. And those documents, they're essential for getting accurate quotes from builders, making sure everyone's working from the same plan, minimizing the risk of errors or misunderstandings during construction.
It sounds like meticulous planning and clear communication are key throughout this whole design process.
Absolutely. Steve really stresses the importance of having a well-defined scope of works for each consultant involved, outlining their responsibilities, deliverables, and fees. That way everyone's on the same page and there are no surprises.
So it's about setting those clear expectations and laying the groundwork for a smooth collaboration.
Exactly. And speaking of collaboration, let's talk about another critical aspect, cost control.
Okay, so we've designed our dream building, gotten all the approvals, and we're ready to start building, but now we need to make sure we can actually afford it.
That's right, cost control. It's an ongoing process throughout the entire journey, from that initial feasibility study to the final construction phase.
So it's not just about setting a budget at the start and crossing your fingers.
Not at all. Steve compares cost control to navigating a ship through tricky waters. You got to monitor your course, adjust your sails, be ready for those unexpected storms.
Okay, I'm liking the sailing analogies.
So to avoid those financial shipwrecks, Steve says we got to focus on the biggest costs. First, revenue and construction. Those are the big leaks we got to plug.
Makes sense. You can't worry about the small stuff if the whole ship's going down.
Exactly. So on the revenue side, it's about making sure your project is priced right based on that market research and that your sales and marketing efforts are actually targeting the right people.
You need to reach those potential buyers.
Right. And on the construction side, it's about getting competitive quotes from builders, scrutinizing those quotes for any hidden costs, and having a solid contract that clearly defines the scope of works and the payment terms.
It's like negotiating a treaty with your builder, making sure everyone understands what they're responsible for.
Exactly. And Steve also suggests having a detailed schedule of finishes for the project. It outlines the specific materials and fixtures that will be used, so you avoid situations where the builder swaps out cheaper materials without your knowledge.
That could compromise the quality of the finished product.
Exactly. It's all about maintaining that quality control.
So are there any other strategies for staying on top of costs?
Well, Steve recommends having a contingency fund built into your budget, a reserve of money for those unexpected expenses that always seem to pop up.
Like a rainy day fund for your project?
Exactly. He suggests setting aside around 5–10% of your overall budget, depending on the project's complexity.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Right. And Steve also emphasizes regularly monitoring your costs, comparing them to your budget throughout the construction process. He recommends using a software program or a spreadsheet so you can track those expenses, identify any overruns early on.
So you've got your finger on the pulse of the project's finances.
Exactly. And if you do run into cost overruns, you need to deal with them head on. Renegotiate with your builder, maybe find alternative materials, make adjustments to the design or the scope of works.
So cost control requires a combination of careful planning, meticulous tracking, and a bit of flexibility.
It does. It's a crucial skill for any property developer. It can make the difference between a profitable project and a financial disaster.
Okay, so we're managing those costs, construction's underway. But what about the authorities? We talked about getting those building approvals, but are there others we need to be aware of?
Yes, Steve devotes a whole chapter to navigating those authorities, which can sometimes feel like a bit of a maze. He reminds us that there will be various authorities involved in our project, from local councils to utility companies, all sorts.
It's like having multiple gatekeepers to your project, each with their own set of roles.
Exactly. And Steve encourages a proactive and collaborative approach, building positive relationships with those officials, understanding their requirements, submitting clear and concise documentation.
So it's about working with them, not against them.
Exactly. Make their lives easier, and yours will be easier too.
Keep those gatekeepers happy.
Right. And remember, those authorities, they're there to ensure public safety, environmental protection, compliance with building codes, their involvement. It's essential for creating a well-built, safe, and sustainable development.
So it's not about cutting corners. It's about working within the system to achieve a positive outcome.
Exactly. And speaking of achieving positive outcomes, let's talk about that crucial partnership with your building contractor.
Okay, so we've got our plans approved, costs under control. We're ready to hand over the reins to the builder. What should we keep in mind when choosing and working with a building contractor?
Steve emphasizes choosing a reputable builder, someone with a proven track record, delivering quality projects on time and within budget. He recommends seeking recommendations from other developers, checking those online reviews, interviewing potential builders to assess their experience, their communication skills, their approach to managing projects.
So finding the right builder is a bit like choosing a surgeon for a delicate operation.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of.
Hmm.
You want someone you can trust, someone who's skilled and experienced.
And just like in any important relationship, communication is key.
Absolutely. Steve stresses the importance of having a detailed and clear building contract, outlining the scope of works, payment terms, timelines, any variations or contingencies.
You need that roadmap for the construction process.
Right. And Steve also recommends those regular site meetings to discuss progress, address any issues, make any necessary adjustments.
So you're staying involved throughout the construction process.
Exactly. You don't just hand over the plans and disappear. You need to be present. And Steve highlights the importance of having a competent and experienced superintendent on your team to oversee the whole thing.
So the superintendent is like our eyes and ears on the ground.
Exactly. They manage the building contract,
Mm.
ensure the project is built to the agreed-upon standards.
They're the guardian of the project's quality and integrity.
Precisely. And building a positive and collaborative relationship with your builder and superintendent, that's crucial. Clear communication, mutual respect, a shared commitment to quality. Those are essential ingredients for a smooth and efficient construction process.
So it's a team effort, everyone working together towards that common goal.
Right. And speaking of achieving goals, let's move on to another critical aspect: sales and marketing.
Okay, so the building's almost done. We've managed our costs, navigated the world of authorities and contractors. Now it's time to attract those buyers, make some profit.
Time to shine.
What are some key strategies for successful sales and marketing in property development?
Steve emphasizes starting those efforts early, ideally even before construction begins.
Really? Why so early?
It allows you to gauge that market interest, secure some pre-sales, potentially attract investors or financiers, get the ball rolling.
So it's about building buzz and anticipation.
Exactly. And Steve recommends engaging an experienced off-the-plan sales agent.
Off the plan, what does that mean?
Basically, it means selling a property based on those plans and specs. Before it's actually built, buyers are buying a promise of what it will look like.
Interesting. So why would someone buy a property they can't even see yet?
Well, they might get it at a lower price than once it's completed.
Yeah.
And for developers, it helps secure funding and reduces risk by having those pre-sales in place.
Makes sense. It's a win-win.
But Steve stresses the importance of having accurate marketing materials that realistically depict the finished product. Architectural renderings, floor plans, virtual tours, detailed descriptions, the whole 9 yards.
So you don't want to mislead those buyers.
Right. Set those realistic expectations. And Steve also emphasizes tailoring your marketing message to your specific target market. Remember that market research we talked about? This is where it comes into play.
So you're marketing a lifestyle, not just a building.
Exactly. And marketing is about more than just fancy brochures and catchy slogans. It's about building trust with potential buyers, showcasing the value of your project, creating that sense of excitement.
And once you've attracted those buyers, it's time to move on to that final stage, settlements, the home stretch. This is the moment we've all been working towards, the finish line, where we get to reap the rewards of all our efforts.
It's a big moment. Settlement is the legal process of transferring ownership from the developer to the buyer. It's the final step. And it's where you finally collect the proceeds of your sale.
Time to celebrate.
Almost. But before we pop the champagne, there are a few things to keep in mind. Steve emphasizes having all your documentation in order. Certificate of title building, permits, compliance certificates, all those important papers.
Don't want to forget anything crucial.
Right. And Steve recommends working closely with your lawyer and conveyancer to make sure everything runs smoothly and there are no unexpected delays.
Dot those I's and cross those T's.
Exactly. And once that settlement is complete, you'll receive that final payment, and ownership officially transfers to the buyer.
It's like handing over the keys to a brand new car, a symbol of all your hard work.
It is a moment to be proud of. And while it marks the end of this particular project, it also represents the beginning of new possibilities. You could reinvest those profits into new developments, expand your portfolio, keep building your property empire.
It's like reaching the summit of one mountain and then setting your sights on the next peak to conquer.
Exactly. And Steve encourages us to view property development as an ongoing learning process. Each project presents new challenges, new opportunities, new lessons.
So it's a journey, not just a destination.
Exactly. And with careful planning, thorough research, a willingness to learn and adapt, and a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit, property development can be incredibly rewarding.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part, exploring those key stages of bringing a project to life, from assembling that dream team and navigating the design process, to managing costs, working with authorities, and securing those sales.
We've gained some valuable insights into that business mindset, strategic thinking, collaborative spirit, all those things you need to succeed in this field.
It's been quite a journey. But before we wrap up completely, we're going to take a quick break and come back with some final takeaways and a thought-provoking question to leave you with. All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into this book, Property Development for Beginners.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. We've learned so much from Steve Chandler about how to navigate the exciting world of property development.
We've gone through all the key stages, from that initial spark of an idea all the way to handing over the keys to the new owner.
And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me has been the importance of having a solid business mindset.
Absolutely. Steve really hammers that point home throughout the book.
You know, we've talked about that business mindset quite a bit, but can you remind us again, what are some of the key elements of that?
Well, it's about making those decisions based on solid data market research, a clear understanding of your financial goals.
So it's not about letting your emotions drive the process.
Exactly. It's about detaching yourself a bit
Yeah.
and looking at the project objectively.
Even if it means making tough choices that might not feel good in the moment.
Right. You got to be willing to pivot if the market changes or if unexpected challenges come up.
It's about being adaptable and resilient.
Exactly. And that brings us back to another crucial point, understanding your market.
Market knowledge, market knowledge, market knowledge. It seems like that's the golden thread that runs through every aspect of property development.
You got it. It influences everything, your site selection, your design choices, your pricing, your marketing. It all comes back to knowing who your target audience is, what they want, what they can afford.
And Steve reminds us that market research isn't a one-time thing.
It's an ongoing process. You got to keep your finger on the pulse of the market. Stay informed about those trends and shifts. Be ready to adapt.
Speaking of adapting, Steve also talks a lot about the importance of building a strong team of experts.
Oh yeah, your dream team of professionals who can guide you through the process and help you avoid costly mistakes.
You need those lawyers, financial advisors, architects, engineers, marketing gurus. It's like assembling an all-star cast for your property development production.
I like that analogy. And each member of that team brings their own unique skills and experience to the table.
But it's not just about hiring the right people, it's also about fostering a collaborative environment where everyone feels valued and respected.
Absolutely. Communication is key. Clear expectations. Shared commitment to quality. That's what makes a team truly effective.
It's about creating that sense of shared ownership and working together towards a common goal.
Right. And even with the best team in the world, property development isn't always smooth sailing.
There will be challenges, unexpected roadblocks, market fluctuations, cost overruns.
It's all part of the process. And Steve encourages us to view those challenges as opportunities for growth.
It's about learning from your mistakes, adapting your approach, and coming back stronger.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes property development so exciting and rewarding. It's a constantly evolving field that demands creativity, strategic thinking, and a whole lot of resilience.
Well said. Steve's book has given us so much to think about, hasn't it?
It has. From assessing risk and conducting due diligence, to mastering the art of negotiation and building a high-performing team, it's a comprehensive guide to navigating this fascinating industry.
And whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, there's something in this book for everyone.
Absolutely. It's a valuable resource for anyone who's passionate about property development.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into property development for beginners, we want to leave you with one final thought. What aspect of property development resonates most with you? Is it the creative challenge of designing a space that contributes to the community, the thrill of the deal, the satisfaction of seeing your vision come to life? Whatever it is, we encourage you to embrace that passion and use it to fuel your own property development dreams.
It's an exciting journey, and we wish you all the best on your adventures in the world of property.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy building.